We're back another week, RotoGrinders, food for thought. We got some fairly breaking news with a quarterback change and it's Chief's favorite team. Go figure. I'm the Luch. We got Will Priester, Chief Justice 06, and a very special guest. Chief, I will throw it over to you and then tell everybody who we got with us here today.
Yeah, man, listen, no stranger to the DFS streets or the betting streets. Brit Devine has been around a long time. And, one of my first prop friends in the industry. And, obviously a couple years ago, we had a show together. And it was called, it was the NFL Prop Shop Show, which was a good show, I think, for people. Sad we weren't able to keep that one going. But nonetheless, he is here today with us on Food for Thought. And so happy to have him. Brit, how's everything going?
Chief, how's everything going for you, man? Let's we can talk about me later. We need to talk about Andy Dalton coming in for your Carolina Panthers. I mean, Bryce Young officially, no, regardless of what the rest of his career looks like, the absolute worst trade in NFL history for them to select him. Now looking absolutely cooked, even worse than last year, specifically this last game, just a whole bunch of plays you can't make as an NFL quarterback. We got the red rifle coming in, Andy Dalton. Literally 2 minutes after I parlayed the Raiders to win something, we get the news in that one. So the odds on that one aren't too great on the cash out. But what are you thinking about your Carolina Panthers right now, dude?
I still don't think we're a great football team, but I also think Andy Dalton is much better than Bryce Young. And I believe, Luke, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I've gone on record saying that Andy Dalton should have been starting anyway. To give the young man some time to get acclimated and maybe learn a little bit. I think there's something to be said about a veteran quarterback coming in, being able to settle down, the wide receiver room, the linemen. I think we're going to look better. Let me just say that. Like, Andy Dalton's a professional. He was a starter in Cincinnati for years and years and years. He's been a playoff quarterback. He's had a number one receiver in A.J. Brown. Like, he knows how to play quarterback in the NFL, and I think that's what the Panthers need right now. We just need – I'm going to use one of our sayings, Luch. We just need competent quarterback play, and if we get that, we'll look better. I'm not saying we're going to the playoffs. I'm not saying this is some massive season turnaround. What I'm expecting, though, is we look more fluid on offense. We are able to score points. We do that, and I think we'll say, okay, that's an improvement. Now let's go from there. And but look, I'm excited, man. That's nothing against Bryce. I always thought Dalton should have been the starter and let Bryce play behind him. And I think we're seeing a result of a young quarterback that just wasn't quite ready yet.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's so many perspectives here. Sure, you can pull him now and let him sit. And then what, do you go back to him next year? For right now, objectively, Andy Dalton's the better quarterback. And for fantasy purposes,
it's not even objectively. In reality, trust me, Andy Dalton's the better quarterback. If you don't think,
to trust you because I know he is.
I'm going to tell you what happened, Brent. Here's what actually happened. Deontay Johnson said, "Look, I didn't come here to not hit my incentives, so you better get me somebody that can get me the ball." I'm partially kidding. But seriously, that impacts a lot of things for guys. I'm sure Deontay Johnson had some, catch incentives, some yardage incentives. I'm sure all of that's piling up. And we're 2 weeks in, and how many points have we scored? 13 points? Like, that's terrible. Like, we had to do something. Sorry, I know I cut you off, Luke. You see I'm getting a little passionate about this. But I can assure you Deontay Johnson's going to look better. Adam Thielen's going to look better. The running game's going to look better. The offensive line is suddenly going to look better. Everything's going to look better. Now, will we win? I'm not saying we're going to win. I still think we're a bad football team. But we're going to see quickly how better a team looks with competent quarterback play.
Yeah, Britt, I mean, Deontay Johnson should be the big winner here, and so should his fantasy owners, because he was the one with the highest draft stock over the summer in pretty much every formats. And we'll see if Andy Dalton gives him the 2023 Adam Thielen treatment. I mean, Deontay had 12 targets all year through 2 games. I wouldn't be shocked if he had 12 next week. We'll have to see, how this factors in. I mean, do you think Deontay is the big winner in this situation for fantasy purposes too?
I think David Tepper's the big winner. I'm sure he had something to do with this. Coming in, that franchise value was going down the tank. So he's the winner today. He gets an extra couple $100 million added to the franchise value with the quarterback swap. But yeah, I mean, we're going to have to see how this plays out. You would think Deontay Johnson, one of the better separators in the league, and Bryce Young can't even hit guys that are open, let alone anyone with any sort of reasonable amount of coverage. I mean, I'm looking at some stats of him, and it's just, I mean, it's literally like the worst quarterback that's ever played NFL football is basically what Bryce Young has been playing this year. So Andy Dalton is for sure the better quarterback. We'll have to see. They play the Raiders. The Raiders are, Chief, still think my Raiders money line is probably going to come through after they were able to sneak it out there in Baltimore. RIP all survivor teams. I know, Luke, you'll have something to say about that in just a little bit. But yeah, Deontay, Thielen, honestly, I'm just going to stay away. Did you see Andy Dalton's price? It might get you everything you want this week, Luch.
No. And so we do our little look ahead. I've been making that my actual first look at the salaries. So then you get a real raw reaction from Chief and I. So I'm holding off until we get to that segment, but I figured he's going to be super cheap and probably.
Hey, then go ahead and sign me up. Don't tell me, Brit, because we don't look until we hop.
He might get you everything you want.
Oh, yeah. Man.
Or it might get you nothing, and he could be the fate of the century. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, speaking of Survivor, I mean, geez, if you avoided some of the major landmines so far, and we had our guy Nick Galeta on the show last week, give some tips, and he puts out a lot of Survivor content, then you're probably in really good shape, and it's only week 2.9. We're not even through week 2 yet, and you're probably looking pretty good. But Splash Sports is a new site, and they're big on Survivor contests. They're available in 34 states. And if you're already eliminated and you're looking for some more action, there are some week 3 pools opening up for the rest of the season. There's also an NFL DFS pick'em, and there's fantasy tiers available. Splash Sports, really cool stuff, and some good prize pools. You can check out more at splashsports.com/RotoGrinders. And since I'm boring you and I'm on a roll here, I'm just going to power through these reads here for everybody, and then we'll get right back to talking about what the hell happened yesterday in week 2 of the NFL. The Favorites Pod contest, if you're looking for a plus EV contest this year, check out our friends over at the Action Network. They have a great plus EV contest for you. Their podcast called The Favorites is bringing back their free NFL Pick'em contest this season. It's totally free to sign up over there at favorites.actionnetwork.com. Just 5 picks against the spread every week. There's cash prizes for the top 10 finishers, $40K up top to first place, and it's $100K total prize pool. So again, check it out over there. Good stuff happening from the Favorites podcast and the Action Network. Wouldn't be football season if I didn't mention Taylor Swift. And for the love of God, if her significant other can do something for my fantasy team, Travis Kelce, where are you, man? Where are you? Really need some contributions from you. Anyway, Taylor Swift, Tick's pick. Are you someone that's dying to go to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour? Here you go, Chief. I know you're a big Swiftie. Play our free game every week for a chance to win tickets and a trip to Vancouver to go check it out. Check out tickspick6.actionnetwork.com to play. And if you're a big Swiftie, maybe you'll be fortunate enough to be the big winner. And finally, football related, RG Listener League. Shout out to the winner, Oak Zoo. He had a score of 181. Don't forget to join our Listener League each week. You can compete to win a free month of RG Premium. So check out the description of this video for an invite to the contest. Oak Zoo, if you are tuned in, congratulations on the big win, and message anyone at RotoGrinders for to get hooked up with your RG Premium. You can hit up me, Brit, Chief, TJ's here producing, anybody, and we will get you hooked up there. So I got Kyler Murray and you got Marvin Harrison, and you survived with Cooper Kupp. So really good lineup, man, and good stuff, and congratulations. So now that all that stuff is out of the way, we did mention, and shout out to Kamish last week, we talked about the look ahead. That was the first game we talked about. We said, hey, Kyler, Marvin Harrison. I unfortunately ran it back with Cooper Kupp myself, but Wow, what a freaking first quarter for Marvin Harrison, Kyler Murray, and the Cardinals. And do we have a status on Cooper Kupp, guys? Have you seen anything recently about what's going on?
Left the stadium in a walking boot, but I gotta interrupt Luch because you said something about a video with the listener league read, but the video is actually for the Ticks Pick 6 for Taylor Swift, and we have a video we have to watch for that. So I'll cue that up right now for anybody looking for some tickets.
Don't let the Chads, Brads, and Dads have all the fun this football season with their parlays and their fantasy team. You can have fun too by playing Ticks Pick 6, and you'll have a chance to win a trip for 2 to the Eras Tour in Vancouver. And the best part, it's totally free. So here's the deal. Each week, you'll make 6 picks. 2 of them will be about Taylor, like who's going to be in the suite with her that game. The other 4 will be about the Chiefs game, and it's designed to teach you the basics of sports betting. So who will cover the spread, or will Travis score a touchdown? You earn points for every right answer, and those points turn into entries into the grand prize drawing. You can win up to 13 points a week. Don't know anything about sports betting? Don't worry. I've got you. Each week I break it all down in a preview article so you can make more informed choices. You must be 21 plus and in the US to enter. For more, check out tickspick6.actionnetwork.com.
Boy, oh boy, that looks like fun. And thank you, TJ, for correcting my error there. What a video.
Did you hear that line, Chads, Brads, and Dads? That's a winner right there.
Yeah, and big shout out to TJ. That was a tongue twister with the Tick Pick 6 thing. Man, that's Wara. She's just so good at what he does. And congrats to the Saints. I know Brit has a lot to say about the Saints coming up here, and TJ is a Saints fan, but man, did they put a whooping on Dallas. But without further ado, I guess we can kind of talk about that in our What's Cooking segment. Who was hot last week? Who made some big fantasy scores, Chief? And Alvin Kamara broke the slate pretty early, and the Saints were humming. Got anything to say about New Orleans? And then we'll let Brit chime in here too.
Well, I think for me, it's New Orleans, and it's all of these upsets that here's the thing. I don't think all of these upsets were flukes this week. I don't think the Saints was a fluke this week either. Here's why I'm saying that. Okay, you score 40 points against the Panthers, whatever. You score 40 points against the Cowboys. Yeah, they're America's team, and I know they get a lot of, mainstream publicity, but this is still a reasonably good football team. Like, they're not the Panthers, okay? And next week, they're going to get the Eagles, and I think we're going to see something similar. So I think the Saints stuff is real, and I'm not saying the Saints stuff is 40 points a game. I'm saying I think they're a good football team, and I think there's some sustainability to what they're doing. Like, Rashid Shaheed is going to go deep and catch long passes on every defense. So it's not like we're just picking and choosing here. Alvin Kamara has always been a threat in the air and in the ground. And I think, with this new Kubiak system and everything they've got going on, I think it's real. Their defense has always been good. Like, nobody just really goes into New Orleans or plays against their defense and runs up the score on them anyway. So now if they've got an offense to complement that, which I do think is real, I think I don't think it's noisy. I think we're going to see some real stuff here from the Saints. Obviously, we know Derek Carr, his big thing has always been health, right? Can he stay healthy? You looked at him last season, it was a back, it was a finger, it was something every game. He'd go out of the game for a couple plays, come back in, and, he should probably get the Iron Man award. He looks healthy. I think this is real. And I think by the time we get to week 5, after we've seen them play Philly, and I think they get let me see, who else do they get along that stretch? I feel like they get the Panthers along that stretch too. I think by week 5, we'll be saying, okay, the Saints are for real, and I'm going to stay in the division. And also the Buccaneers may also be for real too. I don't think that was a small feat going into Detroit, pulling that off. But I just threw Detroit in there because they're in the same division. But I think the Saints is real.
Britt, you're hot on the Saints. Talk to me here.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints are definitely real. They're new OC. I guess maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. First, Chief, I believe from Crunch Time, Alvin Kamara called. Do you remember that from yesterday, my friend?
Yes.
Alvin Kamara GPP winner, I pulled that out of thin air. What was he, about 4% on? Now I had some Kamara teams.
But
Unfortunately,
I also
the rest of it was a bunch of snowflakes around Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
But that was a good one. I know you were on the Saints yesterday too, so backing me up on that one. Yeah, the Saints are real. Who else is cooking? Marvin Harrison. Indeed, he is. He isn't running 16 miles an hour. He hit 20 miles an hour, so that's not the fastest in the league, but he's not as slow, not a bust, looking like that absolute first round wide receiver, one of the best prospects ever. I think the Cardinals might be real guys. They look just like, you don't want to play they played this team and did this, and then this other team played this team and did that. But they played the Bills reasonably tough, right, in Buffalo.
Britt, did you watch this show week 1? Did you watch this show week 1? By chance?
I listened to it, but I was at the gym for that, so
okay.
I may have been.
I took the Cardinals to beat the Bills in week 1, and it was close until the end of the game and some Josh Allen heroics. I believe in the Cardinals. Trust me, I'm a Cardinal believer.
Yeah, so like they played the Bills pretty good, and the Bills just absolutely destroyed Miami. Miami always folds when they play good competition anyway. And then they go out there and they destroy the Rams team. I know the Rams season's probably toast for sure. I don't know if they can trade Matt Stafford, but if Kupp and Puka, if they're out for even a couple of weeks, this season's over. They'll have to do something. Stafford probably won't want to get traded. But I don't know. I think the Cardinals might be real. Maybe their defense is a little better than people were thinking to start the season. And if they can hold on, it's very clear that Kyler Murray with James Conner's looking like one of the better running backs in the league until he gets injured, if he gets injured. You've got Marvin Harrison looking like a true alpha. You can't stop the tight end. You know, he's getting all the targets too. You've got reasonable options like Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. You know, you make fun of these guys a little bit, but they have their own strengths too. It's a very good receiving core.
Yep.
If they've got it on the offensive bag, if they can just hold together on defense, I think they might be real. And I don't think markets have really adjusted to that completely yet. And I'm absolutely on those Saints. My first bet on scores and odds this week. Saints money line. If you're watching it now, I got it at 120. It's down to plus 115. They play the Eagles, and you get an injury-free roll on tonight on any players that might go out for the Eagles too. So I love the Saints at home next week against Philadelphia. I think Vegas has that backwards right now.
And then last week's show, the Cardinals talk continued. During the show, I went on and bet them at 80-1 to win the Super Bowl. I know it's a little unrealistic, but that number it probably isn't there anymore after last week. I'm not sure what it is, but they were my team that everything needs to go right for them to make a run, like everything. And so far, what have we seen? Christian McCaffrey is going to be
losing helps them immensely.
Helps them immensely. Christian McCaffrey, while Jordan Mason is more than a valid fill-in, you just can't do some of the same things that you can do with Christian McCaffrey. And Seattle played a tough game with New England. That was a really close one as well. Here's TJ again. What's going on?
One chime in on the Saints before we move on from it. Clint Kubiak is the absolute savior here. They're through 2 games. They are number 1 in the league in play action rate. Last year, they were 32nd in the league, dead last. Oh, wow. Look at my hair. That's bad. Podcast listeners are getting a better view of me right now than the video viewers because they don't have to see my hair. I don't think, as much as a fan as I am, and as much as this new look offense is incredible, I don't think they can be an actual contender with Derek Carr at the helm. I just don't think he can do it. I think this offense with all the playmakers is making him look good so far, but Derek Carr is not going to be the guy to get it done, unfortunately.
Hey, I disagree. Eli Manning won 2 Super Bowls. So I'm just going to put that to bed right now.
Eli Manning's significantly better than Derek Carr.
Well, in Derek Carr's defense,
agree with that. I think Derek Carr gets the short end of the stick too much of this. Derek Carr's a good quarterback, or else he wouldn't still be in the league. We've seen a lot of guys. He's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's not Bryce Young. Like, I believe in Derek Carr a lot more than I think the field does.
I'm not like a Derek Carr stan by any means, trust me.
Yeah.
You look back at some of his offensive coordinators, Todd Downing, Bill Musgrave, Greg Knapp, like this, and Brit, shout out to Brit. He wrote up in his early pick with the Saints on scores and odds. He cited all the play action and all the pre-snap movement that the Saints are using, and he basically said they're lapping the field right now and adapting to the defense in the NFL, and that could be one of our takeaway conversations. And I think that's a good segue. We might as well just kind of combine these two segments here in terms of who's playing well and what some of your takeaways were. And if you're playing devil's advocate here, and Derek Carr's pretty much been either injured or underwhelming. He was left to die in Las Vegas or wherever, Oakland at the time, for many years. And who knows? I mean, we could probably sit here and say this is probably the best situation he's been in, all things considered. Playing in the dome, having Kubiak, Rashid Shaheed is seriously coming on right now. Alvin Kamara is healthy, at least right now. He has Chris Olave. I don't know. We know he's been so terrible in the red zone the last couple of years, which is why Taysom Hill has broken so many slates from time to time, because they have a kind of another weapon to use down there. But things certainly seem different. And of course, there's so much parity in the NFL. And we're seeing that with the kind of covered two-man deep type of defense. Brit, you want to piggyback off that and give me your thoughts on the current state of the passing in the NFL?
Yeah, so this is from Rich Rebar. He's on the show here with Dean on Wednesday nights. So basically, an absolute must listen if you're playing DFS, sports betting, anything like that. You have to listen to Rich. You have to listen to oh my goodness, how am I forgetting his name? Not Dean. Yeah, him. And then you just this. This is a great show, so you have to listen to it. So Rebar had. Let me pull this up on my phone here. Just some of the absolutely disgusting passing statistics that are going on in the NFL through the first 2 weeks, mainly because of the coverages. There's a couple other things too. So first, the offensive and defensive lines. There's more sacks than ever through the first 2 weeks, as a sack rate. So the sack rate's basically the highest it's been in recent memory. Is this because teams don't play in the preseason? Offensive lines have to gel. There's not as much offensive line talent. The defensive line guys are good. There's more athletes playing. Who knows what that is, but we're in a high sack rate era. So now not only are quarterbacks getting pressured, they're getting sacked. They can't get rid of the ball. They're also playing these too high coverages that you can't go downfield on anymore. So now you can't just be Anthony Richardson chucking it deep every play and guys are running wide open because teams are blitzing all the time and they have one high safeties, things like that. So 2 years ago in 2022, this change really started to happen last year in the NFL. So 2 years ago, through the first 2 weeks, again, this is from Lord Reeves on Twitter, 105 passing touchdowns through the first 2 weeks. We have 66 we still have Monday night to go here. So not in half, but an absolutely gigantic reduction in the amount of passing touchdowns. Not only that, teams are now running more. Quarterbacks are scrambling more. You're able to run for more yards per carry because you're getting more light boxes because of the cover two. So the whole meta in football, from the smart offensive coordinators and team builders, is now we can run the football for 4.5, 5 yards a carry and maybe even break some big ones now. The teams that are able to adapt to that, I think, are going to be very successful. And you have to be able to hit these short and intermediate throws because that's what teams are giving you now. So I'm a little worried for the Anthony Richardsons. Some of these guys that are inaccurate in these short throws, it's going to be a lot tougher for them moving forward. And Richardson specifically, I'm a little worried, right? We saw Jaden Daniels he's 10, 16 rushes in a game. Anthony Richardson, he might get 3 or 4 or 5 rushes. Anthony Richardson is not going to be able to be this fantasy monster if he's only running the ball 3 or 4 or 5 times a game. He needs those 10 rushes that Jaden Daniels getting. You're going to have to let him cook that way. And going on to the Saints, I mean, what do we've got there? We've got Clint Kubiak just running laps around other offense. I mean, he is pushing the absolute boundaries of what it is to be an NFL offense. Some of the stats on that, I've got it pulled up on Scores and Odds here. So again, if you wanted to go get that plus 120, plus 115 money line on the Saints, because like TJ said, I think this is absolutely real. They're running play action on over 50% of pass plays this year. The next highest team is under 40%. So a huge gap there. They're running motion on nearly 90% of plays. The next highest in the league is under 80%. So again, a huge gap there. And when you combine all of those, they're running motion and play action on over 40% of passing plays. The highest in NFL history was just over 30%. So he's just how do you manufacture these athletes open in the passing game and even create running lanes for Alvin Kamara? You distract with motion, right? We've seen Mike McDaniel do this with Dolphins. What's he famous for? A ton of motion, right? You see Tyreek Hill zooming all over the field. You have to adapt, and it's sad. You see the Chief. I don't want to tell you the team at the bottom of this. The least motion, the least play action. It's the Panthers, it's the Broncos, it's the Browns, it's the Titans, it's the Bears, it's the Giants. It's these bad teams, right? So I don't know if is it because they're restricting their quarterback and their teams from doing that because the quarterback can't process it, or are the play callers not catching up to what the defensive coordinators are way ahead of offense in general right now? Usually when this happens, the NFL will start tweaking the rules to make it better for the offense. We'll have to see where it goes. But for fantasy, right, I was looking at some of the top scores in the Millie Maker, some of these really large field tournaments. Maybe not the top score, but in the top 10, you couldn't sniff the top 10 2 years ago unless it was all fire emojis on DraftKings, right? You couldn't miss. Maybe at tight end, you can get like 12, or your defense could get 8. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 snowflakes in these lineups because they need to adjust the algorithm on DraftKings to make our lineups look better, because offense is down the tubes this year. And I don't know if these, like, is a Cliff Kingsbury smart enough to guys? I don't know how to run an offense. I don't know how to make plays. I don't know that, but it seems like these guys in the higher positions should be able to adapt, sort of like what Kubiak's doing in New Orleans. It's nuts to me, guys.
Well, let me just say, from that regard, for those of you that don't know, I do coach girls basketball at the high school level. And I think in every sport, Britt, there has to be some adjusting, right? Like when you look at baseball, there was kind of like the home run or bust period. And then as they made the bases bigger, well, let's go back before that. Before that, Britt, it was let's bunt, let's single, guy gets on second, we want to sacrifice, we want to get him to third, we want to bring him home. Like we want to try to manufacture score runs as much as we can. Then we went through like the home run or bust era where, hey, I don't care if you strike out, just get me a home run, get me 30, 40 home runs a year, and you can strike out 30, 40%. I don't care. Well, now we're kind of getting a little bit back to the middle with some of the rule changes where slightly bigger bases, pitching clock, we're seeing more steals, we're seeing more guys like Lindor, De La Cruz, and all those guys be more or better athletes for the sport. Jose Ramirez, you name it, right? I'm saying that I know I'm tied into football. Same thing for basketball, right? You went from playing this huge post game to now you're running 5 out and you're running a whole lot of motion and you're running a whole lot of pin downs. You're trying to get guys open for threes, a lot of high pick and roll, less hand checking. I'm saying that to say, Britt, if the old regime, the Paytons, right, all these older coaches, if they don't bring in fresh coaches that want to embrace the new ideals, like shifts in the NFL that give you advantages, like being able to spread a team out and read the coverages better and be able to pick apart the too high safeties. If they don't get with the times, they're going to be bad football teams. And I think that's what you're seeing here, Britt, in terms of what you were saying with the Saints. They brought in a coordinator that said, hey, I'm going to adapt and let's beat the new NFL. And that's what we're seeing. This is why Mike McCarthy can't get the Cowboys over the hump. I'm not trying to make this about the Cowboys, but he's trying to take an old offense and not infuse fresh ideas. I think the things that Shanahan did, you look at Kyle Shanahan, his dad he had the system, right? But Shanahan still had to do some things to bring it up into the new era. And that's what we're going to have to see in the NFL, like Sean Payton. I don't think Sean Payton's a bad football coach, and I don't think Bill Belichick is a bad football coach. But I think they're being stubborn with adapting to the times. And this is why they're not as successful today as they were 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Luch, I want to jump in before you move on. What do you think about fantasy now, right? We're trying to win big dollars. This, to me, we were playing wide receivers in the flex for the past 2 years. I think we might have to seriously look at that. Unless you knew you were Squirrel Patrol and you knew Quentin Johnson was going to get 2 touchdowns, I don't like, it's really hard to nail the receivers now. I think the running back meta is a little bit better. And also the quarterbacks. I mean, you're not getting 303. It's not happening anymore. So I don't even want to play Patrick Mahomes, right? I don't want to play these quarterbacks that aren't really running. And we also have the problem that the running quarterbacks
aren't the best passers.
They stink at passing. It's very difficult to try to conceptualize, right? Jaden Daniels, but Cliff Kingsbury, the bad coach, not sticks Terry McLaurin on the left. So you get the 101 with a touchdown, but you get 159 yards passing without a touchdown. He doesn't get you anywhere. Daniel Jones, unless he's throwing it to Malik Neighbors 18 times, not really going to get anywhere. Didn't even hit 200 yards last week against Washington. It's very difficult. So I'm going to throw it to you two guys and give me some quick adjustments you think we could possibly make in our lineups that we're making.
I just had this discussion the other day, at least like a part of it. And of course, it's a big correlation no-no, right? At least in last year's NFL and probably the year before, I think you can play some of these running quarterbacks naked in your lineup if they're cheap enough without any other pass catchers. I mean, if you did it with Jaden Daniels 2 weeks ago, and some people did, you probably felt a little weird clicking that button for tournaments. And there's probably still some people that are going to poo-poo on this notion, but I think we're there. If the parity's real and we see this too deep kind of shell coverage stick, and obviously crazy drop off in passing touchdowns, it's insane. I don't think I have a problem with it. Of course, DFS price is a big component to that, but Lamar has massive games in the past few seasons on the ground. But do I really want to pay almost $9K for him? I'd rather make 3 or 4 very volatile lineups. I think who's the highest priced quarterback I played yesterday? It might have been Kyler. I'm not sure. It might have been Kyler. I made I think 6 single entry teams. I made a Daniel Jones team. Wasn't great. Made a Jaden Daniels team. It was fine. I tell you what, I had a Jared Goff team, and boy, that game disappointed collectively. But when you look at the box score, Goff threw the ball 55 times. St. Brown had 19? Was it 19 targets? Was that right? I think. And Jamison Williams is for real. If that boy stays healthy, I mean, you still have some of those mid-range receivers that I'm more inclined to play right now instead of paying all the way up. And of course, health is a big thing right now. What's Justin Jefferson's status going to be? There's still the main target hogs at receiver. Like I'm still willing to pay for. CeeDee Lamb was pretty good yesterday too. But I think you're right. I think that is kind of one of my bigger takeaways. Is I have no problem playing Jaden Daniels or Anthony Richardson or even Kyler. If they're like 60, 65 or cheaper on DraftKings, something in that area, because you're seeing more design runs around the goal line too. And we saw Jaden Daniels take a wicked hit yesterday, and he was banged up, which is he's no stranger to. Like, he needs to start sliding more. I mean, he was a twig in college, and boy, was he really good at taking big hits. But I'm a little concerned with how much he actually is running right now. So I mean, for fantasy purposes, selfishly, it's great, right? Like, go get those points on the ground for us. But I don't know, Chief. What are your thoughts on do you need to stack somebody? How much is it really going to limit your upside from a ceiling standpoint if this is the trend in 2024 NFL? If this thing sticks, where everything that we just talked about, is that such a wild notion?
Right. Let me say this. As much as we talk about coaches have to make adjustments, we have to make adjustments as DFS players, and we have to kind of read and not read some of the noise. I'll go back to last week to make a point out, and hopefully this will help strengthen our case and answer the question. Last week, Luch, when we were talking about the Cardinals, one of the things that I said was they did not draft Marvin Harrison to have him on the field 90% of the snaps and not throw him the ball. Like, you remember we were talking about that, and we were talking about, hey, let's not overreact to a poor week one, right? And let's not overreact to this, overreact to that. Clearly there were some things that happened that said, okay, yeah, Jordan Mason's going to be fine this week because we know that Christian McCaffrey's not playing, right? Like, they're indicators. I'm using that to answer your question, Luch. I believe it's going to be slate to slate dependent, but you also have to know the identity of the team you're dealing with. I'm going to use the Chargers as an example. Harbaugh came into town. If anybody knows Jim Harbaugh, if you watched him with the 49ers, if you watched him at Michigan, if you watched him build this Chargers team, why was he okay sending Keenan Allen out the door? Why was he okay sending Mike Williams out the door? What is his coaching philosophy? He wants to play great defense and he wants to run the football. Like, that's what he wants to do. So understanding that, Britt, how is this tying into fantasy? How is this tying into what Britt is talking about in terms of less touchdowns, more running, so forth and so on. The game is, I feel like we're trending back to let's find the right running backs every week for DFS. Like Britt brought up a point. He's saying, hey, we're kind of getting back to the point where we need to be playing 3 running backs in the flex. So we're trending that direction. Now, clearly, if you had the right receivers yesterday, like if you had Godwin and Neighbor, so you got these mid-range cheap guys, then you were fine. But like for me yesterday, on FanDuel in my main team, I had Kamara in the flex, mainly because I stacked Dallas and I had Kamara on the other side. And then in my DraftKings team, Britt, I had J.K. Dobbins in the flex. So you get what I'm saying? Like it's not like you're just making this stuff up. And in terms of stack pairing, I think it's going to be game dependent, slate dependent. But like in a general sense, it feels like right now, maybe not stacking is probably the way to go. And just find the quarterback that you think is going to produce that week. And maybe that quarterback is a Dak Prescott to a CeeDee Lamb. Maybe it is Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown that week. But Donnie said something here. Said he asked a question. I'm using that also. Is it fair to say going down to the cheaper guys at quarterback may be the meta this year? If none are going to score over 20 consistently, why ever pay up? I think identifying the cheap quarterback, kind of like we did in baseball this season, we went expensive pitcher, cheap pitcher, stack the offenses. And I think cheap quarterback is going to be the way to go. Find the running backs that are going to get you there. And we might be – I still think pairing is going to be important, but maybe not as important for every single week, if that makes any sense.
I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, right? I mean, scoring touchdowns, those 6 – oh, sorry, TJ, just in a second. Those 6 points are massive for scoring, right? But just for argument's sake, this year, via fantasy points data, there are 16 teams that are passing the ball at least 60% of the time in neutral situations. Last year, throughout the whole year, there was 15 teams throughout the whole year who passed the ball at least 60% of the time. So is it truly a too deep bend but don't break coverage thing? Because it seems like teams are still passing, for the most part, through just 2 weeks, the same amount of times in neutral situations. And obviously outside of the Cowboys game and maybe the Cardinals game, there's been a lot of competitive games. So there weren't too many total blowouts other than a handful so far this year. So that's my devil's advocate. I'm a little conflicted. Maybe there'll be some positive regression in terms of passing touchdowns. But again, like Chief said, like I'm willing to play a cheap running quarterback by himself. Maybe right now. It's normally not anyone's MO to do so. I mean, it's just not been a proven winner in the past. But TJ, what are your thoughts?
I do think we'll see some positive regression with the quarterbacks, like you said, but until they adapt, it's like Britt mentioned, the passing touchdowns are super low. And I do think it's like you said, a bend but don't break, 2 safeties over the top thing. And this is only really relevant in showdown. But Chief and I talked about this a little bit on Sunday night for the showdown slate. I think until teams do adapt and start scoring more touchdowns, and showdown slate specifically, we need to be looking at kickers as far more valuable than they typically have been in a showdown situation.
It's a gross click, but we've seen it a lot in these showdown slates already.
And I think one thing too is look at all the teams and in your mind, think of who the quarterbacks are. There's like 5 difference makers at quarterback in the NFL. And the rest are all, there's like 10 that are like, eh. And I mean, there's some bad quarterback play. You pair that with bad coaching and some of this. I mean, there's Josh Allen, right? We've got Mahomes. We've got Lamar, for some rushing. Stroud. You go to the NFC. Hurts will have to see. We'll see tonight is another little test for him. Is it going to be the Eagles of last year, or is he sort of back into 2022 Jalen Hurts? Dak is, I think, a reasonable quarterback. Geno's playing pretty good. Kyler Murray. Jared Goff has been very Jared Goffy for the first 2 weeks of this season. Is Sam Darnold real? There's no Jordan Love. I mean, that's like it. It's Derek Carr, it's this new ascension. I think the Saints' offense is real. Now, he's not a great quarterback, but maybe they just need.
Do we actually know that?
No.
So that's the thing, right? Like, and I know this is why I love this show, because we talk DFS and we talk the real side too. Like, imagine if Patrick Mahomes had, and I keep using this guy because I do feel like he's one of the older, antiquated coaches. No, I'm not going to use him. I am going to use him. Imagine if Patrick Mahomes had McCarthy as his head coach versus Andy Reid. Like, what would Patrick Mahomes be today? Would he have the championship? Like, I think the situation matters in football, and that's really what I'm trying to say. Like, Derek Carr hasn't had this good of an offensive coordinator ever. Like, ever. This is the best coordinator he's had since he's been in the league. I mean, think about the coaches he's had. Like, just think about that. Like, he's gone through terrible coaching. And so here's the other thing too, Britt. I try to measure him by the throws that he makes. Is he on time? If you're watching him play right now, every pass is on time, in the right spot. Like that's part of him playing quarterback. So situation matters, coaching matters, everything matters. And I think we're seeing that around the league. Like I'll even use Baker Mayfield for an example. Like Baker Mayfield's bounced around Cleveland, Carolina, the Rams, and suddenly he finds his home in Tampa Bay. And Britt, he takes off like a rocket ship, like gets his team into the playoffs, and then you come back this season and they're 2-0. It's like, well, wait a minute, like what was wrong with Baker? It all works together, man. And so everything matters, and I think that's a big component that DFS maybe we don't think about, but it all works together. Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Andy Dalton for the sole purpose of trying to get a better gauge of Dave Canales and to see like how much his thumbprint was on Baker Mayfield's success last year. And, now maybe he can open up the playbook a little bit more. Like we were just, like you just said, Britt, like some of these teams that have, low motion rates and things like that, is the playbook limited because of the quarterback? And, maybe it's not a fair shake for the play caller, as much as we're kind of crapping on Derek Carr's former play callers and just obviously giving major kudos to the job Kubiak's done with him. But maybe we'll get a better gauge of that entire situation because, hey, here's Tampa Bay 2-0. It wasn't the shootout some people were hoping for, but they got the W, and that's cool for the Buccaneers.
Okay, let me say this. So sorry, I'm so sorry. I wanted to look this up because I wanted to see. I'm so sorry, guys, but I had to see this. Who in the world did Derek Carr have for his coach? Like John Gruden, Josh McDaniels? Like what? Like think about who he had as a coach. Like those guys are terrible. I mean, Gruden was terrible the second time around. I'm just mentioning that because I think it matters so much. I think it matters so much.
Go ahead, Britt. Now that Chief is giving you a little airtime, now I'm just kidding.
I forgot what I was gonna say. My mind's in a million places.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, I'll leave it at this, and then we can start looking ahead. I'll open up the DFS pricing, and we can just kind of combine maybe some game environments you're looking at or some things that look appealing with some of the DFS pricing we're going to look at. But I'll just say, I think, the NFL, if you're listening to the show, you probably play some DFS, MLB or NBA or something else. But, when you have such a limited sample size from season to season, and I think it's really fascinating in MLB, you play 40 games in MLB and, your starting pitchers might only have 7 or 8 starts. And you kind of think, okay, when can I start using some of this current information? Like, is it just a small sample size? And then you look into, is this guy changing his pitch mix? I mean, coaching has a lot less to do with Major League Baseball. There's a lot less variables, but you just kind of think about like what's going to stick and what's not. In the NFL, we get maybe 17 games out of some of these teams from year to year. And, it's on you to decide what's real and what's not. I mean, yeah, we've been through just 2 weeks, but if you're going to keep, if you're not having success in DFS and you're building lineups like you were last year, go for it. And maybe the positive regression will hit. Maybe it won't in terms of, passing touchdowns and just passing yards and scoring in general. But I mean, if you're going to take a risk with and of course, bankroll management is huge, but if you're going to adjust your style, I think the time to jump, if you're a believer in this new defensive coverage, is now to at least, give it a shot. And like Brit said, I mean, maybe go a little bit more running back heavy approach. Put a running back in the flex more. I mean, there are a couple of volume hogs left, but you're going to pay for them, and maybe just building slightly different than you're accustomed to could be the answer here. Brett, you got anything left in the tank about that discussion?
I mean, sure. I do tend to agree. Quarterbacks, I don't know. They might not matter too much outside of, I think the upside for sure this year is going to be in the running quarterbacks when they hit for 60 and a touchdown and throw for 202, right? I think that's pretty close to we're not going to get these 350 in 4 and have fire emoji 35-point quarterbacks every week like we did 2 years ago. That I think that's pretty clearly gone. So just be a little bit smarter. I don't think you need, when I was doing those Millionaire Maker articles all those years, it was double stack with a bring back. The field wasn't stacking enough. I don't double stack and bring backs might be dead guys. I mean, if you are always going for that top performance, and that in theory is what you get. But I think it's just easier to play the best plays. And I think you definitely have to have one of these elite target hog wide receivers in every tournament. You can't be messing around with 3 or 4 5K wide receivers anymore. You got to have a stud, if not 2 of these guys that are getting the targets. Otherwise, I think you might be looking up at the standings at everyone passing you.
Yeah, in terms of double stacking, I think price definitely matters. I think there's still some wide receivers that get volume that are probably still underpriced. We'll find out soon. But like week 1 and even week 2, I mean, like Tampa Bay obviously was a big winner in week 1, but I mean, Chris Godwin was like 5,900, and Mike Evans, Mike Evans should be like pushing 8K, you would think, most of the time, just because if there's not a lot of touchdown equity at receiver, if there is, like he's got probably the most in the league in terms of, a target.
Well, I've got a good news for you on Mike Evans for next week.
Okay, well, I'm excited to hear. Chief, got it. Go ahead, Chief. You got anything else? And then
let me hop in on that because I mentioned this last week also, and I'll mention it again this week. This is why you can't overreact when guys are the number one options. So I love Devontae Adams on week 1, and I liked him again on week 2. And what did you see in week 2? The targets were back up, the production was there, over 100 yards. I'm saying that the strength of what Brit is saying here. Like, don't overreact when a guy's the number one guy. Like, things happen. It's a game, right? Weird things happen. But if you stick to the main guys across the board, because the field is going to look at the shiny new toys, they're going to look at the Cooper Cup news, which was accurate, right? Like, you should have been playing Cooper Cup in cash, obviously, if you wanted to win, because we knew he was going to have such a massive target share. But people were overlooking Amon-Ra St. Brown because he didn't get the volume in week 1. Same thing for Devontae. Same thing for Marvin Harrison Jr. Why do you think those guys had such low ownership in general? Because for week 1, they didn't get enough volume. That's why.
Well, I just opened up the pricing. So, Chief, any guesses how much Andy Dalton is?
No.
No guess. 4,800. What do you do with Andy Dalton?
This week they're playing the Raiders. Andy Dalton's a professional quarterback We just talked about the fact that these cheap quarterbacks are probably going to be fine. What do you think we get from Andy Dalton this week? My guess, Britt, is somewhere around 180 to 220 and a touchdown, maybe 2. That's what I think we get from Dalton. And let me do some quick math here, Britt, on my telephone. I'm going to give him 200 flat just to be fair. And let's give him 2 touchdowns. That's 16 fantasy points. Is that enough when you can cram in everybody else? Do you think 16 is enough?
Why not? Gardner Minshew's 5,300. Why not just take him opposite in that game? It's not enough. It's not enough.
I'm just saying because Dalton's so cheap. That's all.
Yeah, giving 2 touchdowns to anyone as a quarterback is a big reach. I think we covered that already for the first 45 minutes we've been going here. Quarterback's pretty interesting. Luch, what are your thoughts on Dalton? I understand. I'm not playing Andy Dalton before. There's you can get running quarterbacks for not much more. You can get Derek Carr's 5,800. I mean, it's he would need to be 4K, I think, the flat, and they just don't price him like that on DraftKings anymore.
I mean, he's gonna project well in most points per dollar and most everyone's models, and you'll probably open up line.
But people still aren't going to play him because he's got a Panthers helmet on. I'm telling you, people aren't going to play Andy. Well, I could be wrong. I don't think anybody's rushing to play Andy Dalton this week.
I think he'll pick up a little more steam than you think.
Dalton is 6,000 on FanDuel, so I think that's the cheapest they go at quarterback.
I think he's a really interesting conversation. He's not someone I want to play alone because his rushing upside is none. But if we talked about earlier, if he gives Deontay Johnson the Adam Thielen treatment, or what if he gives Adam Thielen the Adam Thielen treatment? I don't know. Like, I'm not going to fault you for giving it a shot in a large field GPP with Adam Thielen, but I would think Deontay Johnson would be the guy. But I think just in terms of quarterback, I think we talked all show about cheap quarterbacks. You have Lamar, just a interesting matchup between Lamar Jackson at Dallas, because we just saw what happened with the Saints. We talked about all show, but now you have a run first quarterback against Dallas, and he's the highest priced quarterback on the board. So, I mean, totally different type of quarterback to defend than Derek Carr. Totally different offensive scheme when you're looking at Ravens in New Orleans. So we talked about cheap quarterbacks, but Britt, what's your first kind of thought about Lamar against Dallas?
So I had no Lamar last week, no interest playing him as a big home favorite. These are the absolute games you want to play Lamar Jackson as road underdogs or, road theoretical shootout offenses, sort of like week 1, right? That was the Lamar Jackson's putting his team on his back because he has to from the get-go in that one. Now what did he have? 5 rushes for 45 yards, and I think some of that came on, when they were trying to do a lateral or something like that towards the end. I mean, there was no urgency from him in that game. It's going to be back against the Cowboys. I can guarantee that. I mean, you can't go 0-3 in the NFL and have expectations of having a good season. So this is like a do or die game. So this would be a Lamar Jackson week for me. Kyler Murray 6,900. I'm like CJ Stroud 7,100. Fine, right? But to play CJ Stroud just imagine what everything we talked about, how passing's down and it's hard to project volume, even though he's one of the best passers in the league. Not only do you have to pay 7,100 for CJ Stroud at Minnesota, right? So it's in a dome, that scheme in Minnesota. You saw Brock Purdy was giving him fits a little bit. But not only that, you got to play wide receiver roulette. I mean, you could just play Nico Collins and get it right. But if you're running the Sims or optimizers or whatever, I mean, you're just wasting lineup after lineup after lineup trying to get the receiver combinations correct with the CJ Stroud in this new era where passing's down to begin with. I don't know, man. I want the running quarterbacks at basically all costs right now because they give you the higher floor and a little bit of a higher ceiling to me. So I don't know.
Brian Flores is going to blitz them most of that game. Brian Flores is going to dial it up on him. I'm telling you right now.
Worth noting that while passing is down, it's not for CJ Stroud. He's still at about 500 yards through 2 games, just slightly under. And they will likely be without Joe Mixon in this one.
But he's also 7,100 though, TJ. I think that's the other part that we're mentioning. Like, it's not like he's
Yeah, not like
63,
agreeing or disagreeing, just throwing
Yeah.
in the extra information, reminding Mixon probably going to be out. He seemed to get hurt pretty bad in that one.
I just don't see myself for, I think, the entirety of the year from a cash game perspective, and even more so in tournaments. Tournaments, obviously, in theory, you can still get that 350 and 3, right? That's still available. It just seems a lot less likely than it was 2 years ago. I'm playing running quarterbacks. These pocket passers, even in good spots. Patrick Mahomes, the chalk last week. I mean, I think he has the lowest ADOT in the league currently right now. He's back to last year's Patrick Mahomes. It's just, unless you have that upside of the rushing, I mean, your floor is, even for a Patrick Mahomes, it could literally be 175 yards and a touchdown now, even for like the best quarterbacks in the league. It's risky.
Chief, can I jump in real quick while we're on this game here? And no one's really talked about it that I've listened to. I mean, of course, I read and listen to some of our content, but my best weeks are when I don't get just sucked in by any groupthink, even by super intelligent people, you know. And I think this is the year to be a little bit creative. But Dallas's defensive scheme has done a total 180 since last year. It was Dan Quinn and now it's Mike Zimmer. They ran the third most man coverage in the league last year. I think it was just about 40%. And they've ran man coverage just 15% of the time through the first 2 weeks this year. So totally different scheme. And things might just be bad. It just might not be working, which and you combine this. And I know, Britt, I know you've done a lot of deep diving. You do a lot of research on fantasy points as well. Lamar was really good against zone coverage last year, much better, a much better passer than he was against man. So I know we talked about cheap running quarterbacks, but I think Lamar, I mean, obviously Dallas just got the brakes beat off him, but that scheme might just not be working or not meshing right now. Go ahead, Chief.
Well, I was going to actually mention something about running back. And, since we're talking DFS to close this thing out, obviously, Donnie Watson made an incredible point here at 3:57 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And he said, if you were ever going to play Zamir White, this is the week. And I want you guys to know, like, I do think, like, raw stat stuff still matters. Like, when you're giving up runs on the ground, right? Like, you could just go and sort, teamrankings.com, whatever site you use. You can say, hey, who's giving up the most rushes in the most rushing yards per game through 2 in the league? Believe it or not, the Panthers are up there. The Raiders are up there too, or at least they were, which is why I was interested in hearing yesterday. But I agree here. Like, these cheap the running backs are too cheap again this week, Brett. TJ mentioned Mason. Like, Mason's cheap going against the Rams, who are depleted, right? You're getting Zamir White against the Panthers. And once again, Derek Brown, I said this last week, Derek Brown being out for the Panthers was going to spell even more bad news. Andy Dalton's coming in to fix the offense, but he can't play on the D-line. There's a big hole there. So I agree, like, these cheaper running backs, and that's mostly because of injury. Look, you got cheap running backs again this week. Like, I'm even looking at a guy like Tony Pollard, who, guess what? He's been fine through 2 weeks. Now, he hasn't put up 20 fantasy points, but 15 to 18 at that price. Like, I think we're feeling pretty good on weeks where running backs just don't go nuclear. Devin A-Chain, God, the Dolphins, I feel like that's their only weapon. They paid Tyreek all this money, and they keep giving it to A-Chain 50 times a game. That's also an exaggeration. But my larger point is running backs, man, again this week, Britt, are going to be too cheap. And I think we'll end up with 3 running backs again, 2 running backs and 1 in the flex yet again this week. I think that's going to be close to the optimal way to build.
I will not do a Raiders running back. I'm sorry. They're literally.
Britt, trust me on this.
I saw another.
Britt,
they're literally the worst running backs in history through 2 games of any team that's basically.
Have they played the Panthers?
They have not
played the Panthers.
They have not.
Okay.
So that Saints-Eagles game, Britt, we talked about earlier, 49.5 total, I believe. Also, people are just going to gravitate to that Arizona-Detroit game. Very high total, 425 window, 51.5. Cowboys-Ravens, 48.5 total. close spreads on those games as well.
I gotta think positive regression is coming for Jared Goff, though. Like, if he's going to throw the ball that many times, and this is where I think we balance out the data with like what's actually happening. If you told me Jared Goff was going to throw the ball 50 times a game, at some point he's going to hit 303, right? You just got to find the right game. And they're on the road in Arizona this week. So that's going to be another game where I think people, target that one yet again.
Detroit's another team who it's only been 2 weeks, of course, but they've played man coverage nearly 50% of the time through 2 games. Aaron Glenn's back there. He didn't go anywhere after a couple interviews. So maybe I don't know. Maybe there's been some more changes. It's just worth noting. And if there's that much man coverage, if that continues, you'd think Marvin Harrison's going to get some shots. You would think. What are your thoughts on those 3 games, Britt? Those just seem like obvious point spots for people to gravitate.
I just bet the over 48.5 on FanDuel for the Eagles-Saints game. So I'm going to have to write that up on Scores and Odds at some point. Easy over on that one for me. If the Cowboys and the Saints were at a 47, and this is a 40. I mean, I don't know. That Saints offense is real. I think the Eagles are real, but we'll see tonight. And I think the Falcons are fake, unless Kirk Cousins grew a new Achilles or something like that, because that dude was not moving around last night. But we'll see what happens there. I really like the Eagles tonight. The Arizona game. How do you not want to play Kyler Murray? That just gets expensive, right? If how do you do? Sam Laporta doesn't exist anymore. Jameson Williams has come in and taken a lot of targets. I mean, Sam Laporta should be like 4,200 on DraftKings. He's 6,000. I mean, literally nobody's gonna play this guy.
But Britt, but Britt, to chime in here, this is what I'm talking about. Like, we used 2 weeks, and this week he could legitimately have 8 to 10 targets.
Yeah, I don't know if Laporta has that in him with the emergence of Jameson Williams as the clear wide receiver too. He was not that dude last year, and we'll have to see. But there's basically only 1.5 Detroit receivers that can really go off in a game, and that could also be Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, even David Montgomery was getting receptions there. There's just a lot of mouths to feed on that Detroit offense. Arizona seems, you got Kyler Murray, you got Harrison, you've got James Conner. Yeah, I mean, these are all great spots. You got McBride, but man, that starts getting expensive, and then you're really down to you can't play a couple of stud wide receivers on there. So this is what I'm like. These stacking, it gets pretty tough. The salary looks pretty tight, right? If I put Harrison, if I put Kyler Murray in, and if I want to run that back with, let's even say Jameson Williams, I haven't seen the zone man. I haven't check and see what Arizona's doing. I mean, you're going to need a cheap defense. You're going to need a cheap tight end, especially if you want to play a Saquon or a Kamara or an A-Chain or any of these guys, right? So, I mean, it looks pretty tight on DraftKings to start here, unless we get some injuries, which of course we will between pregame practice, leftover from yesterday. I mean, there's going to be some salaries coming up, but that game certainly looks good. I'm a little worried on this Indianapolis-Chicago game. I would imagine Caleb Williams probably gets some steam at he's like 5,600 or something like that. That's going to get steamed up. I mean, that dude, has not looked good at all. They're not passing for any yards. He's not been ultra accurate. He's made some flashy plays, but the fundamentals aren't really there. I'm worried he's going to get some steam in the dome. I'm sure the blitz is going to jack them way up in the dome there. And the Chicago defense has been reasonably good. They held CJ Stroud somewhat in check. So I don't know. I think that's going to get some steam that I might want to fade. When Geno's been playing well, he's 56. I'd play Geno over Caleb Williams without question.
I think, spitballing here, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about Minnesota, both of you. I mean, okay, week 1 took care of Daniel Jones as they should have. Week 2, I mean, massive W against the Niners. Brandon Ayuk, it might be the Brandon Ayuk week, by the way. 6,200. I know he really hasn't had the game. First game, dropped a touchdown pass, looked rusty as all hell, by the way. Week 2, at this point, I don't know if the Rams if Cooper Kupp he's going to be less than 100%. If he even plays, I mean, the Rams aren't going to sustain drives. This might be an opportunity. You talked about not forcing a bring back. I mean, the Niners could put up 28 points, and if they score them early enough, maybe Ayuk does the damage. Maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. But in terms of a receiver in a really good offense, in a matchup where you should have field position and enough volume, 62 seems pretty cheap for Brandon Ayuk. But Houston and Minnesota, I think, is a really interesting matchup. And one of my takeaways was that Nico Collins, just the alpha. I mean, easy to say by looking at yesterday's box score, but he's got like a 45% air yard market share, I think, through 2 weeks, which is, of course, where your biggest opportunities are going to be. And I'm not giving up on Tank Dell. I think his air yard market share is like over 40 as well. And he has
didn't catch any deep ones yesterday. I mean, just none.
His catchable target rate is really low, really, really low. It's just about 50%, I believe. So just really hasn't had an opportunity to put it all together. So I do think Tank Dell's kind of interesting. But any quick notes on Minnesota? Because they might have had the most impressive, other than the Saints, win of the week in terms of just getting it done and surprising a lot of people. What do you think, Chief?
I mean, situation matters, right? I've been saying this, and I've been saying this on this pod today, partly because of what Britt talked about. How many people wrote off Sam Darnold? Played for the Jets, bad coaching. Came to Carolina, bad coaching. Went to the 49ers, obviously, I'm sure had competent coaching, was a backup. Went to Minnesota with the intent to probably be a backup, right? They were probably going to give the job or at some point to the rookie. He gets hurt. And what have we been seeing, Luch, Britt, this pod? You get competent coaching, you probably find out how good or how bad a quarterback actually is. And what did I say on this podcast, Luch, about Coach McConnell? We saw this last season. It didn't matter which quarterback suited up. Yes, Kirk Cousins was the better of the bunch. We saw the Pastronaut. We saw Mullins. We saw a bunch of random guys at quarterback. And what did they all do, Luch? They put up numbers in this system with Coach McConnell. So some way, somehow, he gets these quarterbacks to play at a level that they otherwise may not have been able to play at. And so when we're looking at Darnold, who's obviously got more years under his belt in the NFL, has been able to see a lot more film, been able to watch a lot more football, get in the middle of a lot more football, be in more team meetings. I think it's impacted his play, and you get the benefit of having Coach McConnell, who is clearly has a way with helping quarterbacks produce. And thus, you see the Vikings come out and play good football. They were at home. And then, of course, this week they get the Texans at home. And so we'll get to see how does this DeMeco Ryans defense handle going into Minnesota, playing a 1:00 game and competing. So I want to see what's going to happen with Justin Jefferson, because they were already without Addison also. If Jefferson's out, then that kind of changes this whole situation, because now all the receivers there are going to be cheap. The tight ends are going to be cheap. So that now he's cheap. It's going to be a very interesting situation by Sunday. So that could be an interesting spot for us to target.
It all hinges on Justin Jefferson, right? We got to see. He says he's okay already, but Kenneth Walker said he was okay last 2 Sundays ago before, after the game, and couldn't make it to a single practice this week. So
Christian McCaffrey said he was definitely going to play Monday night.
Yeah.
Or Sunday night or whatever. And then he went on the IR.
The players want to play without question. We'll see where Jefferson lands, but they do think Addison should be back. So it's I mean, if you're going to play a pocket passer, give me Darnold over Stroud in that game, right? And like he's cheaper, lets you do some other stuff somewhere else. I'm not looking to pay a lot of money anymore for these expensive pocket passers anymore.
All right, I got one question before we move to our next segment, Luch. One question. This is for both of you guys. Do you think we're seeing a changing of the guard in the NFL 2 weeks in? Not trying to get an overreaction, just trying to see how you guys really feel. Do you think we're seeing a changing of the guard with who are the good teams, who are the average teams, and which teams could compete to actually go for a championship? So you saw Minnesota come out of the gate strong, and they've been competing the past couple of years, but just kind of haven't been able to get over the hump. You saw the Buccaneers, they've come out strong this season. I know the Cardinals lost a heartbreaker, but do you guys have any sleepers now that we've gone through 2 weeks that you feel like some teams that we thought may were going to go all the way, like the Ravens, who are 0-2, like the Lions, who are 0-2. The Steelers are 2-0 quietly with Justin Fields at quarterback. Any teams that you see right now that you may not have thought about early this season that could go all the way?
No, but if you're going to buy low, it's now on the Ravens. You know, I mean,
I'm looking on DraftKings. It's plus 1,400. I don't know. I would much rather do a Buccaneers at 45, Seattle at 45. Something. I don't know if the Vikings can do it, but Seattle's got a good defense.
But the Vikings are 2-0. They're ahead in their division currently.
The Saints are 3,500. I know that I saw old. I think was Two Gun on RotoGrinders at some point. I think I saw him at some point on here. I knew he used to be here. I think he had some really big tickets to start the year, plus 10,000 on the Saints. So like I think I'd still buy on the Saints, the Bucks, the Seahawks instead of the Vikings. The NFC is, I think, a little bit more wide open. By the Kansas City, Buffalo, they're coming out of the AFC. This is pretty that's pretty clear to me. NFC wide open to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I like, maybe even betting on both the Saints and Tampa Bay if you think one of them wins the division. And if they mop up the rest of the division, unlikely, but maybe they play deep into consideration for a bye. I mean, you never know. And it's too early to say. I like to give it, October 1st or whatever week that is. Let's circle back and we can talk about some phonies and some real contenders, Chief. But I know we're basically running out of time. Do you have anything for story time or GPP food of the day, Chief?
Yeah, let's go GPP food of the day. And what I'm going to give you guys is a cheap food. Listen, this is a cheap one. Luch, this is my go-to when I want like a throwback from my childhood to watch the football game. This is not the best pizza in the world. I'm not advocating anybody go out and stock your fridge of these. But every now and then, Luch, I want a little bit of Totino's pizza. I'm not saying it's the best pizza in the world. I grab that thing out of there. It's a big square, Luch. I put extra cheese on. I get my own shredded cheese, put it on there, put a few extra pieces of pepperoni on my own, pop that thing in the oven, and pull it out for the football game. So I know that's random. We usually talk a little bit more elevated food, but Totino's pizza, you can get it for $1.97 for the square. And then you get your own cheese and your own pepper and add that to it. It's actually really, really good for me. A little bit of nostalgia, GPP food of the day.
We're talking cheap pizza. That's right up my alley. So give me some of the. So I am a sucker for the stuffed crust pizzas. I know your own local pizza place has good pizza, right? Everyone has their favorite stuff. But man, give me that Pizza Hut stuffed crust. Give me the Little Caesars stuffed crust, the pretzel pizza at Little Caesars. These things are delicious to me. Probably not. If you have salt, I get the salt headache after I have one of those. But yeah, give me that stuffed crust pizza, Chief.
When the best Totino's pizza is? It's like college football Saturday, massive slate. It's like 10:30 at night, and you've had a 6-pack plus already, and you're like, well, I'm staying home. What do I got in the freezer? Oh, I got a Totino's left. Let's pop that baby in the oven, and then you're waking up and probably popping some Pepto-Bismol the next day, but it is what it is. But we do have to hard stop and get out of here. Britt, thank you so much for hopping on with us this week. Where can the people find you on Twitter and some more of your work?
Brit_Devine. Some girl in Texas has BritDevine. Got it before me, and they won't give it to me, even though she hasn't tweeted in 14 years or whatever. So I've been trying.
You got it bookmarked.
It's still Brit_Devine. Scores and odds. The greatest week. I was down a unit or two, but still up, I think, around 10 units. And shout out to Bime4 went nuclear this week on scores and odds.
Yeah, awesome stuff. And thanks again. Keep crushing over there. Chief Justice 06 on Twitter. My man, take us out of here. And thanks, TJ.
We out, people. We out.